The year is 1341, and this is Portugal, and this isn't Portugal. It's a bunch of islands off the coast of North Africa, which we will call the Canary Islands, because that's what they were called. You'd think that the Portuguese, who aren't all that far away from the islands, would be the first to discover them, but you'd be wrong, because the island was visited by the Phoenicians, Greeks, Carthaginians, and most recently, the Genoese. Italian sailors who have a very interesting history of maritime exploration. Unfortunately, we won't hear that story because, quite obviously, the title of the video is Portuguese, not Genoese, so unlucky for them. Anyway, Portugal, once they do discover them, decides to claim the Canary Islands as their own. Castile, which was what Spain was called back then, also claims the Canary Islands, and while Portugal can complain all they want, at the end of the day, Castile has more guns, more men, and more land, so all that complaining is kind of useless. But who's that? Well, that's Prince Henry, who loves sailing and exploring and navigating so much that we'll do him a favour and call him Prince Henry the Navigator, because that's what it was called. In 1415, Henry comes along and asks his dad to conquer the Muslim city of Ceuta in Africa. And what do you know? The Portuguese succeed, and having gained a taste of Africa, and now Africa crazy, the craziest of whom is Prince Henry, who decides to use all the money he has to fund voyages up and down the coast. Now Henry has two goals of these voyages. The first is to find the kingdom of Prester John, a legendary Christian king who is said to reside somewhere around here, which is quite a big area so the Portuguese are better strap in for a long ride. The second goal of Henry's is to find a route to the Indian Ocean and the source of the lucrative spice trade, make lots of money, and use that money to buy a rugby team and a basketball team and make them play cricket. However, he quickly abandons the last part since neither rugby, nor basketball, nor cricket had been invented. Now, unfortunately for Henry, he isn't able to find the kingdom of Prester John or the source of the spice trade. He is unable to discover the former because it simply doesn't exist, and as for the latter objective, where spice obviously does exist, Henry decides to go and die long before the Portuguese got anywhere close to the Spice Islands, which are around here somewhere. But things aren't all bad because all the voyages Henry sponsored while he was still alive turn out to have some use after all, because the Portuguese do discover two islands in the Atlantic Ocean and decide to go and claim them. Madeira and the Azores, two teeny tiny islands, both get added to the collection of colonies, which for now contains just Madeira and the Azores, but that collection is going to get a whole lot bigger, trust me. A major breakthrough for the Portuguese comes in 1434, when Henry as one of his captains, Gil Eanes, sail around this bit of Africa, called Cape Bojador, something that no Portuguese sailor has ever been able to do before. Now this might not sound like an impressive feat, especially since in modern times dozens of ships do the same thing every day, but in all fairness, Gil made the trip in this thing, and the area itself is actually quite deadly, so in terms of impressiveness, I'd honestly say that his voyage ranks around here. Hey, look, at the end of the day, he's made more discoveries than you and I have, so stop typing your comment. Just when you thought things couldn't get any better for the Portuguese, along comes Pope Nicholas V, who issues a papal bull, which straight up just gives Portugal the entirety of West Africa. Now obviously the actual bull is a lot more complicated than what I described, but since if I were to actually explain it in its entirety, this video would both go on for hours, and I'd have to take a class in Latin to analyze it properly. So as far as we're concerned, Portugal now owns this bit. Of course I got to deal with the Muslims who have been there for hundreds of years, and don't really care what the Pope says. And boy did the Portuguese deal with the Muslims, not by fighting them using weapons, since that's scary and dangerous and comes with a very high chance of death, but instead by trading with them, which is a lot less scary and dangerous, and comes with a very high chance of getting rich. The Portuguese set up trading posts called feitorias along the coast of Africa, and began to trade in all sorts of good stuff, such as gold and sugar, and some not so good stuff, such as slaves. Yikes. Wait, what was that? Oh no, Henry has only gone and died. I guess that's the end of Portuguese exploration. Except it isn't the end, not even close, because the Portuguese king Alfonso V decides to go and find a new Henry, Fernão Gomes, who, despite his love for sailing and exploring and navigating, will not receive the nickname the Navigator, because apparently that moniker is exclusive. Alfonso gives Gomes a monopoly over the entirety of the Gulf of Guinea, and in return, Gomes must explore 160 kilometers of the coast each year for 5 years. That might sound like a hard ask for you, but not for Gomes, who decides to go and exceed the requirement, and his explorers manage to discover Ghana and push into the southern hemisphere, finding the islands of Sao Tome and Principe. My goodness, it looks like everything's getting discovered now. Hello Congo River, goodbye Congo River, g'day Namibia, see you later Namibia, and oh look at that, it's Bartholomew Diaz, who goes and rounds the Cape of Good Hope, and for a while, it looks like nobody can upstage the Portuguese platoon. Up until somebody goes and upstages the Portuguese platoon! Yes, that's right, it's the year 1492 and Columbus has sailed the ocean blue, making him the first man to discover America, if you don't count the Vikings, or the people already living there. But it's obvious that Columbus doesn't count either of them since he claims America for Castile, and all of a sudden the Portuguese now have some serious competition when it comes to exploration. For a while things get very tense. No, tenser than that. No, even tenser than that! Yeah, that's close enough. Until Pope Julius II comes up with a very smart plan. He decides to resolve all of his tension by cutting the world in half and giving everything here to Castile and everything here to Portugal in what we call the Treaty of Tordesillas. And, surprisingly, the plan works, until Martin Luther and the Reformation comes to town, and the Protestants throw the plan completely out of the window. But for the time being, the Portuguese are going to have to make do with this bit, and you, the viewer, are going to have to make do with this part of the story. That's right, it's a multi-parter, and no, this is not just a cynical way for me to get you to subscribe, so you don't miss the next installment. Although, come to think of it... Hello, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, be sure to subscribe here, and check out another video here. Till next time.